the last time we talked Turkey on Counting the Cost, it was all about uncertainty. The AK party had lost its parliamentary majority. Another election was set for 4 months later. Turkey was a bit rudderless, really. But now the turnaround. AK party has since won that election, a big win, where it regained its majority in parliament with 317 seats, enough to form a government on its own. But perhaps winning the vote was the easy part, because now it's about turning Turkey around and dealing with some big challenges. Ankara has, of course, resumed its war with the Kurdish separatists, the PKK, and suffered numerous ISIL attacks as well. That violence has alarmed Turks and foreign investors, surely part of the reason the electorate swung back towards a single-party government. And the economy's got its own problems too, and as we know, in the end, it's all about the economy. So let's start with the currency. The lira's tumbled more than 25% against the euro and the dollar this year, one of the worst performing emerging market currencies in the world, though it has bounced back almost 5% since the election. There is the current account deficit, which has now widened out to $45 billion in the year to July 2015. Essentially, Turkey is spending much more than it earns. The once booming economy that grew 9.2% in 2010, now forecast to grow only 3% for this year and 2.9% for the year after, and that's according to the IMF and the World Bank. And the vital tourism and export sectors have also shrunk. Tourism revenue is down in the first quarter of this year, and the export goal of $173 billion for 2015, very likely that will not be met. So Turkey needs something solid to reverse all these trends, and not surprisingly, President Erdogan believes he and his party are the right people for that.
The national will manifested itself on November the 1st in favor of stability. After the short-term developments, the national will decided that there is no way out other than choosing stability. They decided in favor of stability. I hope this outcome will be good for our people and our country.
Well, let's find out. Joining us from Ankara is Professor Murat Yulek, who's a former IMF economist now with the Istanbul Commerce University. You know, President Erdogan, I'm quoting him here, he says the people decided in favour of stability. Has he got a fair point there that with all this uncertainty there's been in Turkey, that we're now looking for some stability and that's what the AK party brings?
Yes, I think this is the general sentiment in Turkey that was reflected as the president, in the president's words. There are a number of reasons that observers, let's say, have cited why AK party has, led to a great majority and an unexpectedly high vote. And among them is the fact that people are really now looking for economic and political stability. So I guess that what he said would be supported by different observers in Turkey as well.
So what sort of economics, what sort of economic policies does the AK party bring to Turkey? What have they talked about in the lead up to this election? What are they promising to do with things like the falling currency, the deficit, all these sorts of issues?
Well, basically, one advantage that AK party, the governing party, had was they were in power for now almost 13 years or so. And as you know, previous to that period, Turkey has experienced a number of financial and economic crises, coupled with political instability and different economic problems like very high inflation and fiscal policy and current account deficits, etc. And during the last 13 years or so, there has been a success in terms of economic stability. For example, inflation went down. The growth was much more, let's say, much less volatile, much more stable. And at the same time, although normally you would expect a governing party after 10 or 13 years to lose support from people, apparently, generally, the people are favor of, let's say, the governing party because of the political stability and economic stability that came with them. Basically, what they said was, we are proposing these things to increase, for example, the minimum wage, which, by the way, will be borne by the private sector more than the public sector. Or we are going to increase the let's say, minimum pension payments to the lowest echelon of, let's say, the scale. When you add them up, about 7 or 8 billion US dollars is quite manageable because Turkey's fiscal situation, including in 2015, but also previously, is among the best in Europe. So it is quite manageable. And there is not a large concern about, whether there will be an inflationary consequence or a fiscal consequence of these promises.
Now, you talked about the minimum wage there, and I would like to focus a little bit more on the issue of unemployment. How bad is unemployment in Turkey? Because I always see that as the most important measure. You can talk about current account deficits, and you can talk about currencies, and you can talk about debt or anything, but really employment will always be the thing that is most important to the people of any country.
I think you are quite right. In terms of employment, we are between 9 and 10%. Compared to Europe, it is not very, very high because in Europe now, as you know, there are let's say the countries like Germany, which are doing very well in terms of employment. I think they are about 6 to 7%, if I'm not wrong. But then you got, for example, Spain, which is about 20%. So when you look at Turkey, around 9 or 10% in Turkey is manageable. But of course, it is not what normally we would expect. We would expect in a high-growing country like Turkey, those unemployment rates to go down.
Do you think that Turkey's international partners will be happy seeing the AK party back in power? We come back to this issue of stability. Those partners may or may not agree with AK Party's policies on any number of things. But the fact that they're back in power, they might actually like that just because it means some stability for Turkey and its place in the world.
Well, again, of course, this is more about, a question to the economic partners of Turkey. But personally, when I look at the news in different international media, and when I talk to people, of course, now the world is very small, so you get, emails and WhatsApp messages from everywhere in the world, personally also. In general, I think the fact that there is a stability, let's say, gain from one single-party government, there is, I think, a good reception so far. People from Germany's Chancellor Merkel to President Obama, almost every leader in Europe, in the US, in Japan, etc., have congratulated, obviously. But then there is, of course, the Middle East now is quite, quite, let's say, adventurous. So there are a lot of political and diplomatic issues between countries, between almost every country in the world, centering around the situation in the Middle East. So in terms of politics, what leader really, congratulates by heart or which leader not, I cannot know that. But on the official level and at the personal level, it looks like the financial environment, like the banks, etc., international banks, international investors, or political leaders, they are all apparently welcoming the situation.
Professor Murat Yulek on the future of the Turkish economy this week. Professor, thank you for that.
Welcome.